there are some people on social media right now who go around saying that Yoruba people are tribalistic. They didn't allow Zik to become premier. Meanwhile, we won election. We allowed a Fulani person to become a mayor in Enugu in the 1950s. If you're Yoruba here, this is what this is your response. See that 1951. I think it's important for Yoruba to actually know this thing. It's simple, but sometimes you may just forget. But we won't forget after today. 1951 election, Zik actually won. Without winning an election in Lagos, Zik will not be thinking of becoming the leader of government in Ibadan. And let me repeat it again. The election of 1951, Zik actually ran for an office in Lagos and he won. That office was to represent that constituency in the Western Region Parliament in Ibadan. And Zik won. Who voted for him? So when you hear things like we had in Enugu, there was Altine, who was a Fulani man, and it's true, who was a mayor of Enugu, remind them that Zik also won in 1951 in Lagos, and it wasn't about federal capital, it was to represent that Lagos area, because that part of Lagos, until 54, there was no capital territory. That part of Lagos was part of Western Region. So Zik was in the house to represent Yoruba people, or to represent Lagos, that area in Lagos. He won. If we are so tribalistic, how did he win? Did he import people from Yorubaland? He won. However, because he's the Lord and Savior of certain people, we're supposed to allow him to become the leader of government business in Yorubaland or in Western Region. I know what, at this point, I'd like to read what he had to say about that election, because a lot of people have said nonsense, but right now I'm not going to read that whole. Let me quickly read some to you. I hope I can quickly find that book. Mumbo. I want to read to you what Zik said about that election. When they said, Yoruba people did not let him win, he won. He couldn't win more than one seat, and he won that seat. And he couldn't form government without the majority, which he did not have. So this is my Odyssey. This is Zik's own autobiography. It was published in 1970. And this is what Zik had to say. Towards the end of 1951, I stood for another election, this time to the Western House of Assembly as a representative of Lagos. Again, please, not to say I just talk, they hear what in the talk for himself. In talk say, is standard for election, this time to the Western House of Assembly. I know you know these things, but I want to make sure that we are together. Please, anybody knows where the Western House of Assembly was situated or located? Anybody, please write in the comment section. Let's have this short interaction. Anyone? Where was this Western House of Assembly? Thank you. Ibadan. This is not Ikoyi or Balinde, Ibadan. So let me start again. Again, this is Zik, right? Towards the end of 1951, I stood for another election, this time to the Western House of Assembly, as a representative of Lagos under the Macpherson Constitution, and I topped the poll. It did not top the poll, by the way. I think that was other name there. But the point is, he won. Zik won in Lagos to represent Lagos in Ibadan, and he won. The NC, now this is the part that is crazy. This one is the crazy part. The NCNC was under the impression that it had won the election with 43 members out of 80. Have you ever, in your adult life, heard a politician say, we were under the impression that we won? Some of these things, talk about fuck and see, or come and sleep away. What do you mean you were under the impression that you won? In other words, you're not saying you won. You're not even saying that you lost. You are saying you are under the impression that you won. Who speaks like this? One group, 2023, top to bottom, the one that carry pop-off bowls to the court. Everybody's always under the impression. We were under the impression that, the NCNC was under the impression that it had won the election with 43 members out of 80. As it turned out, 20 of the legislators who were known or regarded as NCNC members or supporters or sympathizers decided to align themselves with another party. Lie. That's why I said it's a painful thing when I read books by Igbo elders. It's painful. It's painful. And I'm not even Igbo. I'm not Igbo, but it's painful. And I'll tell you why it's painful. It's painful because, let me read to you again what he said and think about it. If anybody in his right mind will write let me not, just think about what he has to say. He says, 20 out of the legislators were known or regarded as NCNC members, Nalai, supporters or sympathizers. How can you assume that your party would win because you have supporters or sympathizers or ex-members who did not declare for you before the election? How do you expect them to, that because of them now you have won? You know what? Since we are on this matter, let me read to you some of the things here. Then I'll now read to you how the 1951 elections actually went down. So, who were the people he thought would have won? He says some of these legislators who disappointed the hopes of the NCNC are as follows. Then he wrote the names. Let me tell you the names. Number one, Chief Arthur Prest was legal advisor of the NCNC at Sapele. When he said was, we should ask when. This was before the elections. So at this point, this person that is calling Arthur Prest was not even in the party anymore. Chief Anthony Naoro had been a supporter and sympathizer of the NCNC from time immemorial. The officers and members of the NCNC were of that opinion until after the election. Are you noticing that he's not saying that the person was a member? He said he was a supporter and sympathizer. So because he was a supporter and sympathizer, he must declare for us when we win. Let's continue. Number 3, Chief W.J. Falaye was the NCNC representative at Akure. In fact, he was a local agent and correspondent of the Western African Pilot and was nominated by me as national president of the NCNC to fill a vacuum created when neither the Ondo NCNC nor the Nori NCNC were prepared to accede to the wishes of the Akure NCNC. I was asked to use my offices to settle the dispute. Hence, the nomination of Chief Falaye, which satisfied this constituency. Number 4, Chief F.O. Awoshika was a candidate supported by the NCNC Ondo branch. Number 5, Chief S. Akinola was a candidate supported by NCNC Ilesha branch. 6 to 10, Chief M.A. Akinloye was a candidate supported by the, I'll explain all these things, with Mabolaje NCNC Alliance at Ibadan. Chiefs Aboderin, Akibiyi, and Laleyin were also supported by the Mabolaje NCNC Alliance at Ibadan. Only the late Alhaji Adegoke Adelabu, also of the Mabolaje NCNC Alliance, associated with the NCNC after the election. You know what? There are other names, but let me quickly read. He mentioned the particular person's name. I think it was Aboderin. I want to read what he had to say. Mombo, stay with me, please. I have to go to another book. The book is called The Political Philosophy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo by Abegunrin Olayiwola. This chapter is called Chief Obafemi Awolowo as Premier of Western Nigeria, 1952 to 1959. But the journal is called Chief Awo, 1952 to 1959. So this particular one is called The Political Philosophy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo by Olayiwola Abegunrin. So let's get into it. Now you know the name. The 1951 parliamentary elections was contested by two main political parties. The Action Group and the NCNC vied for supremacy in the Western Nigeria. Although there were other local parties, mostly cultural organizations without affiliation to the AG or the NCNC before the elections. Some of these local organizations were Ibadan People's Party, IPP, and Ibadan Citizens Council, ICC, in Ibadan, Ondo Improvement League in Ondo, Otuedo in Benin, Nigeria People's Congress, MPC in Lagos. Please pay attention. Before the elections, the public relations officer of the Nigerian government, Mr. Harold Cooper, wrote to all political parties contesting the elections to make known names of their candidates for the final elections to the House of Assembly. In addition, Mr. Cooper told newsmen at a press conference that, this is what Mr. Cooper said, this would help his department to identify the party to which elected candidates belong when issuing press releases or broadcasting results for the final election. I'll tell you that again. This would help his department identify the party to which elected candidates belong when issuing press releases or broadcasting results of the final election on Monday, September 22nd. It is understood that letters have been dispatched to the secretariats of the NCNC, the Action Group, the Nigerian People's Congress, and other parties contesting the elections. The Action Group submitted its list of candidates, while the NCNC did not submit or publish the names of its candidates. Why? Because they did not know who was for them or against them. Confused set of people. When was this? 1951. The Action Group submitted its list of candidates while the NCNC did not submit or publish the names of its candidates. In addition, the Action Group list was released before the final elections and published in the Daily Service and the Nigerian Tribune on and before the September 24, 1951, the day of the final election in most parts of the West. By the way, we're going somewhere. They also asked for manifesto. NCNC did not provide any manifesto. They said they were going to wait till after the election to tell the people what they're going to do for them. And they accused AG that this manifesto they are talking about too early. This was too early and was a way of getting people to vote for them. Why else would you put out manifesto? It's not to get people to vote for you. Somebody say LP. Yes, now it's similar to what you hear that if you put out a manifesto, they'll copy it. Guys, Nigerian news be like deja vu. Be like, let me put it this way, Nigeria history, what did they happen now, now deja vu? And I can assure you, Nigeria's history sometimes is more current than tomorrow's newspaper. If you can just take the time to understand what happened. So they said list of candidates, AG provided the list, NCNC did not. Manifesto, AG had one, NCNC did not. But that's not where I'm going. Where I'm going is I want to respond to something I read in Azikiwe's book. That's why I even came to this book in the first place. So let me do what I think is the smart thing to do. I'm going to read what Azikiwe said. We'll now read the response from the people he was talking about. You mentioned about daring. That's the reason we went to that book. So let me read to you what Azikiwe said. So he said that some of the legislators who disappointed the hopes of the NCNC are as follows. He said Chief M.A. Akinloye was a candidate supported by the Mabolaje NCNC alliance at Ibadan. Chief Aboderi, Akinbiyi, and Lanleyin were also supported by the Mabolaje NCNC alliance at Ibadan. Only the late Alhaji Adegoke Adelabu, that's Michael MS, only the Alhaji Adegoke Adelabu, also of the Mabolaje NCNC alliance, associated with the NCNC after the election. By the way, when you go through this list, all you'll be seeing is that they were supported by NCNC. You will not see the thing that they were the candidate of the NCNC. But let's go to what the person that he mentioned said. Again, this is how we understand history. So it becomes easy. So, back to the book by Olaiwole Abegunrin, The Political Philosophy of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. It says Chief A.M.A. Akinloye, Chief Moyo Aboderi, Chief D.T. Akinbiyi, Chief S.O. Lanleyin, Chief S.A. Akinyemi, and Alhaji Adegoke Adelabu, the people he mentioned, they all contested on Ibadan People's Party, not NCNC. Egbe Omo Ibile platform and won. They were independent of both the AG and the NCNC. In other words, it wasn't like NCNC people won, AG now took them away. They did not belong to either group. They were not even AG members. Only Alhaji Adelabu went with the NCNC, and this is what Chief Aboderi said. Dr. Azikiwe had sent telegrams to all the 6 elected members of Ibadan People's Party, urging them to join his party, the NCNC. Dr. Azikiwe's strategy was, however, faulty, since he relied mostly on Adelabu and Akinloye and thought that by getting the two of them, he would be able to switch the other members to his camp. I favored the action group, and I succeeded in getting all the members with the exception of Adelabu to the action group. The popular idea that the IPP cross-carpeted from the NCNC to the action group is therefore erroneous. Who is speaking here? Chief Abodering. Chief Moyo Abodering. Who Azikiwe was talking about that we supported them. They were not members of the group, and it didn't. So again, apologies. We said people in Nigeria, when they use words, you have to ask for the definition of terms. Supporting Toba Toun Soyi. The question you should be asking is this: how popular was NCNC in Ibadan? And the people that, when you said Mobolaje NCNC alliance, did they win because of NCNC, and how did you even support them? They won under Ibadan People's Party. So all the lies they've been saying, they've been banding about since 1951, that they didn't allow Zik to do anything. Zik could not because he did not have the majority. By the way, Action Group also did not have the majority. Therefore, both parties began to woo the independent candidates. Whether it was the IPP, but the people like Chief Aboderin, Chief Lanleyin, Adekunle Adelabu, and the rest of them, or with Odutola from Ijebu, or with folks from Ekiti and Ilesha, they were now wooing all of them. Come and join our party, because you have, again, this was parliamentary system, not like what we have right now. In order to form government, you have to have the majority or create or have an alliance with another party. And neither of them had the majority. Therefore, they had to woo people. So let's read a few things before we go back to the original, the main book. At the close of the election on September 24, 1951, the Action Group, judging by its list of candidates released before the election, had won 38 out of 72 seats contested. 3 days later, 3 candidates who contested as independent and won joined forces with their colleagues to sign the Action Group Pacts of Loyalty. They were Alhaji D.S. Adegbenro, Egba Division, J.O. Osuntokun, Ekiti Division, and S.O. Hassan, Epe Division, making AG 41 seats. Chief Adeola Odutola contested and won as an independent in Ijebu-Ode, and after the election, declared for the AG. Chief Adeola Odutola's declaration for the Action Group was announced by Chief Bode Thomas in the Daily Times of November 1, 1951. In addition, the 3 Otu Edo members, including S.O. Igodaro, Benin Province, won on the platform of their local party, also declared for the Action Group. The Western Regional Elections of November 1951 gave the Action Group a majority victory of 44 seats out of 75 seats in the Western Nigeria House of Assembly. Only in Lagos, by the way, Lagos is not Lagos State too. This Lagos is not Lagos State. It's Lagos Town. There's a town called Lagos. So whenever we say Lagos, I'm talking about the entire state as it is constituted now. This is 1951. There was no Lagos State until 1967. Okay? So he's saying here that there were 5 seats in Lagos. Again, those 5 seats were going to be representing Lagos in Ibadan. And Action Group did not win any of those seats. They were all won by NCNC. And one of those seats was the one that Zik himself won. So every time they tell you that we didn't allow Zik to win, ask them the question. The one that he won that made him think of becoming the head of government in Ibadan, how did he win that one? Did he import Igbos from Enugu to vote for him in Lagos? Yoruba people voted for him. That's why all this, you are tribalist, now lie. They're just lying. So there was an election in September, there's another one in November. At the end of the day, AG had 44 of the 75, and Lagos had, and of those, and NCNC had the rest. But NCNC had, how many? I think 22 or so. But 5 of those were from Lagos. The crazy part, by the way, was that, no, let me just read a bit more. Let's just continue. Because if I read it out, if I say it, I'll still read it, and I'll say it again. Only in Lagos were the 5 seats won by the NCNC, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe, and there were internal squabbles and indiscipline within the party, which led to all the 5 NCNC legislators contesting among themselves for the 2 seats allocated to Lagos in the House of Representatives. What does this mean? You see, back then, again, it was Lagos, even the Lagos town, so it wasn't FCT, there was no it wasn't capital territory until 54. So in 51, it was part of Western Region. Okay, the people that came into the Western Region House of Assembly came from all over Western Region, right? Now, of the 5 that got in from Lagos, 2 of them will represent the same place in the House of Representatives, according to the Macpherson Constitution at the time. So you have 5; those 5 are in Western Region House of Assembly, but 2 of them will represent Lagos. So it's like think of House of Assembly and House of Reps, and think about it this way. Let's assume that you have 5, again, just to make it very clear, using our own terms of today. So think of 5 House of Assembly. Say there are 5 constituencies, right? Now, from the state perspective, it's 5 constituencies. So each of them will produce a member in the House of Assembly, right? Then those 5 House of Assembly constituencies are now divided again into 2 constituencies for House of Representatives. All right. So that means basically that of those 5, 2 of them will then go to the House of Reps to represent Lagos again. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You have 5 seats in Lagos. Your party won all 5. Now, your party needs 2 people to represent the same Lagos in the House of Reps. Should you not find it very easy to organize yourselves and pick the 2 that will be representing Lagos in House of Reps? But NCNC was so disorganized, and there was, again, everybody who has written about Zik, it wasn't a good leader. Again, no, even Easterners said it, but let's leave that part. The point I'm trying to make is this. Each of the 5 wanted to represent Lagos in the House of Reps. In other words, the party could not even say, 2 of you go there and represent Lagos. Every single one of them wanted to go there, which was also a sign. I mean, it's a way to also understand the fact that the leadership of NCNC at the time was shaky. Let me just continue. The election result was a disappointment to the NCNC, whose leader, Nnamdi Azikiwe, had anticipated a majority in the regional and central federal legislature prior to the election. Azikiwe declared that he would not accept a ministerial post in an inferior legislature of the colonial type. This loss crippled the plan of the NCNC leader to paralyze the machinery of government, which will lead to the reformulation of a new constitution for Nigeria. Obviously, I'll explain. Obviously, the election outcome gave a majority to the action group, meaning that the NCNC could not form the Western Regional Government as Nnamdi Azikiwe had hoped. However, the result in Lagos gave the NCNC some hope that its national president, Dr. Azikiwe, would become a leader in the federal legislature, because under the Macpherson Constitution, a stipulated number of representatives from each administrative division was to be elected to the Federal House of Representatives from the Western House of Assembly. When the Western Nigeria House of Assembly met for the first time in January 7, 1952, 49 members instead of 44 declared for action group, thus culminating in a controversy that created a long mistrust between Chief Awolowo and Dr. Azikiwe. Apparently, the action group led by Chief Awolowo was able to organize the Western Regional Government with a comfortable margin, AG 49 and NCNC 26. But the House of Assembly was required to elect 2 of the 5 NCNC representatives from Lagos to the House of Representatives. The action group majority in the House voted for Dr. Olorunimbe, NCNC, a Yoruba, and Prince Adeleke Adedoyin, a Yoruba, who later joined the AG, neither of whom would step down in favor of their leader, Dr. Azikiwe, NCNC, and Igbo. I'll quickly explain. I already said earlier that of the 5, 2 could go. Now, so Zik had only one role he could play in the Western Region Parliament: minority leader. Minority leader. but he said that he will not accept a ministerial post in an inferior legislature of the colonial type. In other words, if he was not going to be the head of the Western Region government, he will not accept a ministerial post in the Western Region Parliament. So, which means that the other thing he wanted was to be able to go to Lagos, having been nominated by the Western Region Parliament to represent Lagos in the House of Representatives. Now, if you were a leader and you are the organ of the party, what's so difficult in you being able to have a conversation amongst yourself, five, and say, listen, you are five, this person should represent this person, this person. Anyway, the action group had to vote, and what's the other person's name? Prince Adeloke Adedoyin. That is so let me tell you the pain. Although Bolage was saying in a book that maybe they should have let him go to the federal house, but no, I like what they did. What you are saying basically is that, number one, I'm in this region. Listen, I'm in this parliament now. I'm Igbo man representing Lagos in Ibadan. But if you're not going to make me the head of this parliament, I don't want to have any ministerial post here. So you know what AG did? If you don't want to have a ministerial post here, you're not going to have anything at all, even in House of Reps. In other words, you will be in here, but you'll be a member like every other member. Mo like e baje. Baje. Odun. Odun. Azikiwe and most of the Igbo believe that Chief Awolowo used ethnic persuasion to win over Dr. Lauro Nimbe and Prince Adedoyin. By the way, this man went to Prince Adedoyin's father, Zik, who was a king in Remo, and told him that he should persuade his son to step down for him. Zik told the king that the king should call his son, Adeleke Adedoyin, that Prince Adedoyin should step down for him, Zik, to go to the House of Representatives. So the man asked a question. He said, the king asked a question, that role that you are talking about, is it a good role? Zik said yes. So the king said, if it's a good role, why should I tell him to step down from it and you should go? Why should I tell him to leave it if it's good? So the king asked him, if that role, if that position is good, why should I tell my son to jettison it? Why should I tell him to abandon it for you? That pain is what they are still carrying today. It's not that Zik did not win a seat. Zik won a seat. It's that Zik was not allowed to lead everybody, because he's the Lord and Messiah. And you know the song they were singing for him in Abba is the Lord and Messiah of everybody. He's the king of his people. Henceforth, Nnamdi Azikiwe majority of the Igbo never trusted Chief Awolowo and the Yoruba, as Awolowo was labelled a tribalist, thus putting more flame on the political discord between Chief Awolowo and Dr. Azikiwe, which had started in the Nigerian youth movement in the 1937-1938. Actually got really serious in 1940, by the way. We talked about it, what happened in October 40 earlier. Let's read a bit more. Consequently, subsequent activities hardened the Igbo against anything Yoruba, and with this episode, Azikiwe as national president of the NCNC was pigeonholed as an unofficial leader of opposition in the Western House of Assembly. Dr. Azikiwe, listen to this ridiculous statement. Dr. Azikiwe defended his abysmally poor performance at the polls, that he and his party were under the impression, as we read earlier, that they had won 43 out of the 80 seats in the Western House of Assembly, but 20 of the legislators whom they regarded as their members, supporters, or sympathizers aligned themselves with the action group. Victimhood. It's a victim. You heard the names of the people we read. You heard the parties they contested on, right? they were not in NCNC. They were not sympathizing with NCNC. NCNC just was under the impression. So the rest of Nigeria, this is what we're in 2025. Wait, oh, this is 74 years, right? Right? Right. So for 74 years, what we have been arguing against in Nigeria is the impression of a man and his cohorts. Well, did people decamp later? Of course they did. Was it at the time they said it happened? No, it didn't happen at that time. That cross-carpeting that way shouting, those people did not belong to NCNC. They were independent candidates. They were the bride that everybody wanted to have. They were trying to get this, the girl, everybody wanted to become their bride. So you woo the girl, she said no, you're now crying like a bitch. I had to use that word. But sincerely, people are still crying like bitches in 2025. Imagine you go to a girl, you ask her out, and she says no. You're now crying and saying that, listen, I was under the impression that girl liked me, but that one has married her. Now, what's happened with that, though? If they see, they don't call you a man, they call you a bitch. You see fine girl, you talk to the girl, fair one now, fair me. If the guy says no, the fish inside the ocean, there are plenty. You look for another one, or you re-strategize. But no, they say Yoruba people are tribalists. We've dealt with that one. Let's go back to the primary source. I'm talking like this because somebody sent me a video yesterday. And that video was saying, how is a bigot, how is a tribalist, they didn't allow Zik. I'm like, why do people even use the word they didn't allow? Allow as how? Like, let me speak like this guy that used to say, piti, as how? Is that how they say it? That's how he says it. As how now? As how? Like, based on what should you be allowed to become the leader of people in Yorubaland? Or Western religion? And let me also quickly say this because I think it's also a mistake we make. People say it was not allowed to become the premier. There were no premiers in 51 or 52. There were no premiers. We didn't have premier until 1954. What you could become was you could become a minister, and then you could also become the leader of government business. That's what you could become, and that's what Awo did, and that's what your Ita became in Enugu. But when Zik could not take being the minority leader, I'll repeat it 1,000 times if I have to. Zik was in Ibadan representing Lagos. He won that election. When he couldn't take being minority leader, he then moved back to the Eastern region and orchestrated a plan that ousted Eyo Ita, who was from present-day Cross River State, and finally turned the entire thing to an Igbo thing. And it was that same Eyo Ita, we're going to get to that later on, who then got him reported, which led to the answer from House of Lords 1956 and the First Assorting Tribunal, where they found him guilty of stealing £877,000 from the Eastern Region Marketing Board. Let's go back to the other book now. Hope you're having a great time.